Hello everyone, welcome to 21 Gems of Chess. I'm Grandmaster Priyadharshan Kannappan from Chess Gyaan Academy, and the series 21 Gems of Chess is brought to you by Chess Gyaan Academy and Follow Chess app. So what we do in this 21 Gems of Chess series is that we take games of legendary players who had the highest potential in chess, who came very close to becoming world champion but fell short. And we have been doing this for 2 weeks now, so this is our second week of the series. So we are now on day 12 of our 21-day series. And the grandmaster, or technically not a grandmaster, I mean, he was a very strong player back in the day. Richard Reti is the player whose game we are going to be looking at today. So Richard Reti was an Austro-Hungarian and then later on a Czechoslovakian player, and he was one of the principal proponents of the hypermodernism in chess, which was propagated by Aaron Nimzowitsch. And Richard Reti was also very famous for composing a lot of chess puzzles and studies, and he also has an opening named after him, like for example the knight f3 d5 c4 system is called the Reti system. And so we are going to be seeing a game of his today, and his opponent today is also a player who has an opening system named after him. Black player is Saviely Tartakower. So the game that we are going to look at was played in 1919, 101 years ago, in a match between Tartakower and Reti in Vienna. So in this game, Richard Reti is playing the white pieces and Tartakower has the black pieces. So let's get into the game. So white starts off with e4, and then black replied with c5, knight f3, e6, knight c3, a6. So normally after knight f3, e6, white would go d4, but here as white goes knight c3, he's just waiting to see what exactly like black wants to do, like where black wants to commit his, let's say he wants to go a6, or if he wants to go knight c6 and so on in this position. So here black goes a6, again inviting white to play d4 and convert back into normal theoretical positions, but white continues to avoid it and goes g3. So here black has bunch of options. Black can go b5, and if bishop g2, go bishop b7 with the idea of b4 and picking up this pawn on e4. So white can go d3, if d6, short castle, knight f6, go knight g5, h6, knight h3 with the idea of kingside expansion with f4, g4 and so on, and attack on the king side. So this is one possibility. On fourth move, if black goes b5. If black goes d6, then white would just complete its development with bishop g2, and then after knight f6, go short castle, bishop e7, e5, d takes e5, knight takes e5, short castle, and then go a4. So here white has a slight edge in my opinion, because this bishop on g2 is very active, and white's most likely going to play something like d3 followed by bishop f4. And also, as white has played a4, b5 is not a possibility anytime in the future, so there's like kind of a lot of restriction on black's queen side pawns and pieces. So white has more space and easier to develop, gives white a plus equals position. So in the game, black went fourth move knight c6, white went bishop g2, and black went knight f6. So this move was a novelty or a new move in 1919, but obviously there has been a lot more games played now. So till then, previously black had only played d6, so kind of stopping e5, then to go knight f6, and if short castle, then follow it up with knight f6, d4, c takes d4, knight d4, and we have a theoretical position on the board. So over here, for bishop g2, black went direct knight f6, and white decided to short castle. If white had went e5 trying to attack the knight, then black would go knight g4, and if queen e2, queen c7, short castle, and knight g e5, and black would have an extra pawn. And I don't think white has enough compensation for the pawn here. That's why white decided to short castle. So if black wanted to get a safe position, black would simply go d6, stop e5 ideas, and if white goes d4, play c takes d4, knight d4, bishop d7, and after knight takes d4, bishop d7, there are This is basically start of a theoretical tab. Yeah, white has different development ideas and a lot of strong games have been played from this position onwards. Instead, what black did was for the sixth move, black decided to go bishop e7, and for this, white realized that okay, so as black is continuously delaying to go d6, I will play e5 here. So d4 instead of e5 would be a very normal move, but instead white goes for a kind of a critical continuation. So for e5, black decided to go knight g4 and white went queen e2. So for queen e2, now let's say if f6 is played, kind of immediately putting pressure on this pawn. F6 is technically a dubious move, we'll see why. The point being, after e takes f6, knight takes f6, white has this move rook to d1. So now white is going to open up the position with d4 and black is going to be in trouble. So for rook d1, short castles, d4, knight takes d4, knight takes d4, c takes d4, rook d4. Even though black technically has central pawns, I mean two pawns on the center, the pawns are not going any further forward. So even if they go d5, then e5 square becomes weak and so on. And white's development plan seems pretty straightforward. White can go bishop e3, rook a d1, if needed go something like knight e4 or move the knight away and go c4 and so on. And black is going to be in trouble. So I like white's position here. So instead of f6 on move 8, black went queen c7 and white went rook e1, and now black should have played f6. The key difference being going f6 here and compared to the previous moves, that as white has already committed rook e1, he cannot go rook d1, or if he goes rook d1, it's a waste of tempo. But white can still get a slightly better position if he plays e takes f6, knight takes f6, d3, short castle and go knight e4. Still more comfortable position for white in this position. In the game for rook e1, black went d6, which in my opinion is a mistake, as now e takes d6 was played, and if bishop d6, then white has knight e4, kind of trying to win the bishop. And if black goes back bishop e7, white simply goes d3, castle h3, with then initiative kind of moves with bishop f4 and all that on coming up soon. So if black, instead of bishop takes d6 on move 10, decided to capture queen takes d6, and white played d3, short castle. So here is a critical moment in the game, and how should white increase the pressure that he has on the black pieces would be the question. So some of the ideas that come up to my mind is maybe some sort of bishop f4 could be an idea to immediately attack the queen. And I think a more critical move would be to go knight d2. Looks like a bit backward move, but it's actually a maneuvering idea. The point being the g4 knight is attacked. If black goes back knight f6, white can go knight c4, aiming at this weak square also. And also then he can decide where to put his bishop e3 or f4. If black decides to counter attack with knight d4, white can simply play knight takes d6, knight takes e2, rook e2, bishop d6 and go a4, and a backward pawn, and white can just go a5, knight a4, knight b6 kind of ideas, or if needed somewhere bishop g4, bishop e3, and black is going to struggle to equalize. So knight d2 would have been a very strong move on 12th move, and bishop f4 is also an interesting move for white. Instead, white decided to play knight g5, which is not such a great move. So for knight g5, I think black has two options. In the game, black went knight f6. If black had gone knight g e5, which is a dubious move, white plays the fairly straightforward bishop f4, pinning the knight. And if black goes f6, here white has either knight g e4 or queen e4. So let's look at knight g e4, as it looks very logical to move the knight away from the threat and attack the black queen. And if black goes queen d8, white can simply play bishop e5, knight e5 and go knight d2. So a lot of pressure on these two pawns on e6 and b7, and if knight c6 or so, white can even actively consider giving up the other bishop also in exchange for a very broken pawn structure, and white will try to keep the position close and exploit the very poor pawn structure of black. So this is one option. Instead, on 14th move, instead of knight g4, white can also try to go queen e4, forcing black to play fg5, bishop e5, knight e5, queen e5, queen e5, rook e5. And again, the pawn structure is a problem for black, and white has a plus equals position. So this is if 12th move, black goes knight g e5, but black did not go this. Instead, black played the better move, which is knight f6, and white went knight c e4. So here, black played a very passive move, and which is queen d8. I feel he should have first played knight takes e4, and if knight e4, maybe then go queen c7 or so. At least now the fact is that as white's knight is on e4 and not g5, there is less pressure on the h7 weakness and a possible attack on the black king. So if knight takes e4 on 13th move, white would possibly capture queen e4, immediately threatening to capture queen h7. So if black plays bishop g5, rook e8, white has double bishop advantage and a long-term advantage for white. But black certainly has some resources in his hand that he can try to use. But instead, on 13th move, black went queen d8. This allowed white to play knight f6, bishop f6, and go queen h5. So before queen h5, we'll also look at some of the alternatives. For example, bishop c6 is a kind of interesting or a borderline dubious alternative for white. Black can simply play bishop g5, bishop takes g5, queen takes g5, and white can go back bishop g2. Still obviously pressure on this pawn is kind of weak, but I feel like black should be able to kind of hold the position together here with some sort of rook a7 ideas, maybe with I plan to go b6. So this is if 15th move bishop takes c6, and another option for white would be obviously to go back with knight e4, threaten to capture the bishop, and if black goes back bishop e7, white will go c3, taking control of this d4 square. And if e5, there's a very interesting line here. White can go bishop e3. If black goes f5, white unfortunately cannot take knight c5 because f4 and then bishop is attacked, and if the bishop moves, then c5 knight is hanging. So white cannot play knight takes e5, but if white goes knight d2, black will play f4, bishop takes f4, e takes f4, bishop takes c6, removing the e7 defender, and if f takes g3, h g3, b takes c6. I feel black has compensation because if queen e7, black can play queen takes d3, and white king is also kind of weak on the light squares like f3, g2, h3, and all these squares. And black having a light squared bishop, black can certainly control and create some threats. So this is f15th move, knight e4. In the game, white played the best move. White went queen h5, defending g5 and also at the same time attacking on h7. So if bishop takes g5 now, it would be just a mistake, as white would capture bishop takes g5 back, queen b6, and white would simply go rook b1 defending the pawn, and then plan some bishop e4 or bishop d2, bishop c3 ideas also if needed. And black is going to have a tough time defending on his king side and also completing his development. So for 15th move queen h5, black decided to play h6 in the game, and for h6 white went knight e4, and now as you can see the c5 is hanging, h6 possibly could be hanging with some bishop h6 tactics, and also knight takes f6 is a threat. So seeing all this, black went bishop e7, which looks like a natural reaction, but I feel this was a mistake. Instead, black should have gone knight d4, threatening to capture on c2, and if knight takes f6, queen takes f6, and if white goes something like, let's say, like queen d1, then black can play e5, c3, knight c6, bishop e3, and double bishop advantage, so plus equals for white. So for knight d4, instead of knight takes f6, let's say something like queen takes c5 is played. In this position, I feel black can go b6, that's one option, or also black can consider moves like bishop e7 here, so that if the queen moves to c4, then maybe moves like b5 exist, and a lot of pressure on the queen, and c2 pawn could be hanging at the end of the line. So seeing all this, knight d4 would have been a better move for black on 16th move. Instead, black went bishop e7, which is a mistake. So here white, the most logical move for it would obviously be knight takes c5, but this is a mistake because black can go g6, attack the queen, and if the queen moves, then the knight is hanging, so white loses a piece. So the most logical or immediate forcing move is actually a blunder for white. So white did not play knight c5, instead white played c3. But before we look into c3, which is an interesting trap, we look at another alternative, which is bishop e3. So here now white is now clearly threatening to play knight takes c5, but here there is a very interesting move for black. So if you are calculating, I would suggest you to pause the video and maybe calculate it out, like what could be that interesting move for black and how the variations could develop before you proceed with the video. So let's see what that interesting move is. The interesting move is f5. Wait, so why can't not white just simply capture knight c5 would be the question. But if white captures knight takes c5, black has a very nice move, f4. The point being, if gf4, there's rook f5, and then now the knight on c5 is lost. So knight takes c5 would not work, so white would have to go something like knight d2 on move 18, and if black goes knight b4, white would have to return back with queen d1, knight d5, knight c4. Still certainly a plus equals position due to the weak e5 square and possibly a4, a5, and kind of fix the b6 square weakness and so on. But black's position isn't terrible either. So this is 17th move bishop e3, but this was not played in the game. Instead, white played c3, which is an interesting trap kind of variation, because if black, let's say, plays the most tempting move, which is to capture the pawn on d3, which is also where the trap is hidden, white would simply play bishop takes h6, g takes h6, queen takes h6, and if knight e5, it will go knight f6 check, bishop takes f6, bishop e4, and if knight f3 check, it will go king h1. And now there's a mate being threatened on h7, and black is going to lose a lot of material. So the most tempting move, queen takes d3, would be a blunder. And another option for black would be to go something like bishop d7, trying to complete the development. So here, if let's say bishop takes h6 is played, then what happens is g takes h6, queen takes h6, f5, queen g6 check, king h8. If g4, black can go knight e5, queen h6, king g8, and looks like black is defending the position here. So instead of bishop takes h6, white can go bishop e3 first, and after provoking b6, now white has an option to go bishop takes h6 or go knight d2. So if let's say bishop h6, so what is the difference of playing bishop e3 and then capturing on h6 compared to directly playing bishop h6 is that as black has been provoked to play b6, you will possibly win an exchange on a8 at the end of most of lines. So like let's say bishop h6, g takes h6, queen takes h6. So here if black goes knight e5, knight takes c5, knight g4, queen h5, b takes c5, queen takes g4, king h7, bishop takes a8, queen takes a8, and we have a equality unclear kind of position. Even though white has rook and 3 pawns, the light square weaknesses near the white king are too huge, so which is a kind of worrying for white's pieces. So on move 19, instead of bishop h6, white can simply go knight d2 and have a plus equals position, as white would possibly try to regroup his piece, maybe knight c4 at some point, and knight e5 kind of ideas. But all this happens if 17 move bishop d7 was played, but black did not play that move. Instead, black went f5, so white went knight d2, and now black played queen takes d3. So black decided to give in to his temptation and capture the pawn. So now the question is, we have a critical position on the board, and white has actually a numerous attractive continuations. So what continuation should white choose, and why over the other other interesting attractive continuations? So I would strongly suggest the viewers to pause the video, calculate it out, and then play through the video. So let's see what some of those attractive continuations are first of all. So white in the game played knight f3, which is actually not an attractive continuation. The attractive continuations would be something like bishop takes c6, looks like a bit of a kind of an anti-positional decision. Why would you give up the bishop? But the point being, after b takes c6, white can go knight f3, and if bishop f6, white can go bishop f4. And here the e5 square is going to be at stake. White can go some rook d1 or knight e5 kind of ideas. Bishop d6 could be an idea coming up for white after rook a d1. And white has more than enough counterplay for that one pawn, because black's pawn structure is so bad here. So this is if 19th move bishop takes c6. Another move that white can play is 19th move knight b3. The point being, now obviously bishop h6 is one of the threats, and also you're kind of keeping an eye on the c5 pawn. So if black goes queen d8, white would go bishop e3, if queen b6, rook a d1, and white has the initiative because white is not letting black develop the bishop, which in turn means the rook on a8 cannot be developed. So more than enough compensation for the one sacrificed pawn, as white has ample amount of play. So for 19th move knight d3, if black goes king h7, kind of defending the h6 pawn from any sort of bishop h6 ideas, then white can simply play bishop f4 with the idea of rook a d1 and have a plus equals position, more than enough for the compensation. So in the game though, white played knight f3, which is a mistake because you're kind of blocking your own bishop on g2 with knight f3. So here black's best defense I would suggest the viewers to make a guess, calculate it out before you proceed with the video. The best defense for black here is to go bishop to d7, which unfortunately was not played in the game. Instead, black went queen to c4. But let's first look what is the defense behind bishop to d7. The point being, if white goes bishop f4, black will play bishop e8 attacking the queen. White would go queen h3, then rook f6, now kind of defending both e6 and h6. And if white goes knight e5, black can go queen b5, and if c4, black can go queen b6. So even though white is a pawn down, white has generated some play which has to be accepted. But the point is that the queen on h3 is kind of out of the game, so it can't really generate a lot of play. It has only generated a certain amount of play, and that will continue, but new kind of initiative I don't think can be created by white here. So black is solid enough to hold on to the extra pawn and kind of give back the pawn at the right moment, and I think neutralize all the initiative that white has. So in the game, black did not go bishop d7. Instead, black made a mistake with queen c4. White went bishop f4, continuing his development. Black went bishop d7. And here, would suggest the viewers to figure out a plan that white missed. But it's kind of a genius idea, and you can find this idea if you see why black went bishop d7, or what is the idea behind bishop d7. The idea behind bishop d7 is not just to merely develop the bishop, but there is also some other idea hidden behind it. So for let's see what white should have done and what white did. White did bishop f1, which is a dubious move, but what white should have done is white should have gone knight d2. The point being, if queen d3 is played, white's queen will come back to d1. So the idea, one of the ideas of bishop d7 was to go bishop e8 and attack the queen. So by pulling the queen back to d1, now you are keeping the queen safe, and also kind of like you are threatening moves like queen b3 and attacking e6 and b7 and activating the queen on the queen side. So for knight d2, this is the story of queen b3. If black goes queen b5, then white can play a4. If queen takes b2, go rook a b1. If queen a2, go rook b7 and attack down the 7th rank. And black is going to be in trouble here. So this is on 21st move of knight d2, which was not played. Instead, white played bishop f1, directly attacking the queen. So black went queen a4, white went b3, black went queen a5. And here white played bishop c4. So white is now aiming at the critical e6 pawn, and once the e6 pawn falls, kind of there's going to be a lot more pressure on g6 and h6 squares. So here the question is, should black play something like rook f6 and defend the e6 pawn, or should black go ahead and capture the c3 pawn, is the big question. So calculate those two variations and then proceed from there. So here let's continue with what the variation that was played in the game. Black went rook f6, which is a mistake. Instead, black should have captured the pawn on c3, and possibly the game could have continued with either knight e5 or bishop e5. If bishop e5, black would go knight d4, knight takes d4, c takes d4, rook a c1, and a plus equals position due to weaknesses on these critical pawns near the king. But clearly nothing like immediate loss or any such sort for black. So this is on 24th move bishop e5. So another option for white would be to go 24th move knight to e5, and here if knight takes e5, bishop e5, queen a5, white can go rook d d1, putting pressure on the d7 bishop. And if black goes something like bishop e8, white has bishop e6 check, king h7, bishop takes f5, and white has got his pawn backs, and still the black king is under tremendous pressure. So 26 bishop e8 is ruled out, and so if black goes bishop c8, then white can go queen g6, threatening to capture on e6. If bishop f6, bishop takes f6, rook takes f6, queen e8 check, rook f8, queen e7, and there is a lot of pressure on the e6 pawn and also on the c5 pawn. So white certainly has a plus equals position on hand. So this is if 23rd move queen c3, which is the most fighting and critical response. Instead, black went rook f6, which is a mistake, even though that idea behind is technically to defend these two pawns on e6 and h6. So white goes knight e5, and if knight takes e5, then white would just simply capture bishop e5 and then put pressure on g7 pawn. So for knight e5, black went bishop e8, white played knight takes c6, b takes c6, and white pulled back his queen to f3 and keeping an eye on the c6 pawn. So black went bishop d7, white went rook a d1, rook a7, bishop e5, further attacking and pushing the rook back. If he goes something like rook g6, then rook is kind of trapped on g6. So black decided to go rook f7, and for this white decided to play a nice exchange sack. I mean, it's a temporary exchange sack, not really an exchange sack, as white can immediately get back his exchange anytime he wants. And that is white played rook takes d7, rook takes d7, and played bishop takes e6. So for bishop takes e6, black went bishop f8 and white captured queen takes f5, queen takes a2, and white went rook e3. So white's idea is to either go rook d3 or rook f3, and then kind of pick up the f7 rook with an extra piece in hand. So after rook e3, Tartakower realized that he doesn't have anything really to play for, so he resigned in this particular position. So if we look at this game in depth from an overview perspective, I would certainly like to say that Tartakower did misplay the opening. He should have realized the dangers of how much white would get initiative after going e5. So black should have voluntarily played d6, stopping e5 from becoming a very strong move. And the other mistake I would say is that the way black was trying to develop his pieces on the queen side or early in the game was not optimal, and that allowed white to play moves like c3, which was a very interesting and decision. I wouldn't say it was a trap, I would say more of a cunning decision, kind of tempting black to play queen takes d3. And a move like c3 kind of shows you how much of an understanding that Richard Reti had in the position, that he was willing to sacrifice that one pawn in exchange for a lot of activity and counterplay. And that is kind of what when I was initially saying about the player, I mentioned that Richard Reti is one of the proponents of hypermodern chess theory. So he kind of understood that the pawn isn't really that worthy when you actually can develop counterplay by sacrificing a pawn. So that is a critical point, and also you can see how many tempos black actually lost with his queen, and after capturing on d3. So all those tempo gains went in favor of white. So that's all basically from today's game between Richard Reti and Saviely Tartakower from their match in 1919 in Vienna. I'm Grandmaster Priyadharshan Kannappan, and this is 21 Gems of Chess brought to you by Chess Gyaan Academy and Follow Chess app. So the idea is to bring you one of the best games of a legendary chess player who had a lot of impact on the chess world and who generally came very close to becoming a world chess champion but did not become one. So in the previous days we have seen games from grandmasters like Jan Timman, Polugoveski, Geller, Bololevsky, Reshavsky, and so on. And today the grandmaster or the strong player whose game we saw was Richard Reti. So if you want to see the previous games with PGN, you can see them in the Follow Chess app. If you want to see the video part alone, you can certainly subscribe to the Chess Gyaan YouTube channel, and you can see the video part of the previous 11 games of analysis on a video format in Chess Gyaan YouTube channel. So once again, thanks everyone for supporting us in this initiative. We have got some tremendous feedback and comments from the Follow Chess app audience. And signing off is Grandmaster Priyadharshan Kannappan. Everyone stay home, stay safe, and I'll see you all with a different Grandmasters game tomorrow. Bye-bye.